Do you look for hidden messages in dreams, oracle cards, or even tea leaves? If so, you're not crazy, and you're surely not alone. The art of studying dreams and other forms of psychological and spiritual analysis have been practiced by humans for thousands of years because it's natural and often very comforting to gain insights and assurances that help us navigate this wild journey of life. Today, I'm joined by psychoanalyst and dream expert Dan Lawrence, who will help us explore this fascinating topic. Today, we'll focus on this listener's real-life question. I've had a series of failed relationships, and I don't know if it's something with me or with the men I choose. After my last boyfriend moved out, I keep having strange dreams about wolves coming into my house and chewing everything to pieces. Do you know if there's a message for me in these dreams? And with that question as the focus of today's episode, I'm Dr. Carla Manly, and this is Imperfect Love.
Welcome to Imperfect Love with Dr. Carla Manly, psychologist, author, and relationship expert. I'm here to help unravel mysteries and misconceptions about love, relationships, and mental health issues, plus everything in between. Love is complicated, people are not perfect, and relationships surely can be tough. Together, we'll navigate this messy, imperfect space of real life.
Please note, as this episode may contain sensitive information, listener discretion is advised. If you need support, please see the special links in the show notes. Today, I am joined by a very wonderful guest, Dan Lawrence. Dan, welcome to the podcast. You are a psychoanalyst, a consultant, a dream expert. You're just such a wonderful, yummy human being. Could you tell our listeners just a little bit about what makes you, you?
Hello, thank you for inviting me too. You're wonderful too. What makes me me, I think, is a deep curiosity. I think since in your introduction there's hints about the underlying patterns in things, in a sense. And from a little boy, I was fascinated by those kind of cracks between words and what was hidden in behind what is manifest, in a sense. So as a little boy, I didn't speak to anyone until I was 5 years old. I was almost completely electively mute. And I think people were very worried about me, but I was very happy, in a sense, because I was fascinated. I was absolutely fascinated by where thoughts come from, where dreams come from. And just trying to work out what it is to be human and to have a mind. And so, for instance, when if my mother called out to me, she used to call me Danny. If she would called out to me Danny, I would be struck by this question of what is this Danny in her mind, and how does it map this moment-to-moment experience? So I've never lost that curiosity. I've tried to find ways of expressing it and ways of approaching that question of what it is to be human. And I'm still trying. I'm not there yet.
Well, I am with you in that journey. It is an ongoing question. That's so fascinating, though, your background and being mute, so to speak, electively so, for the first 5 years of your life, because it sounds as if what was going on inside of you was so all-absorbing that you didn't have the need to speak to other people. There was too much going on inside.
As a young adult, I explored a monastic vocation as a way of responding and deliberately entering into that silence again. And I almost became a priest in the Church of England too. And a very wise old bishop advised me that to undertake a Jungian training was a similar kind of route, in that you're both listening to what people are saying, but you're listening to the unknown at the same time, and to the mystery of life, and carefully, attentively doing your best to put together the pattern behind someone's life. So it's been a rich path for me.
Absolutely. And I'm Jungian trained as well. So listeners, What we're talking about are people who are trained in the works and ways of Carl Jung, Jung. So don't want that to be a mystery to you. And it's called depth psychology for a reason, because you go deep into the psyche. You're looking at, as you were saying so beautifully, Dan, you're looking at the patterns. You're trying to put those puzzle pieces together, and the puzzle pieces of life aren't always quite cleanly put together as much as we might want them to. So any other pieces about what makes you you before we launch into the topic of today?
It's funny when you ask that question, because different things come into your mind. So two things have just popped into my mind. One is that I'm a surfer. I love surfing, and I've surfed all of my adult life. And there's something about surfing. And in particular, I've surfed mats, floppy mats. So not stand-up surfing, not proper surfing, as you'd say in England. This bizarre kind of Zen-like surfing that involves you lying on a thin kind of layer of air in a mat without a leash. So it's just you and the mat. And you've got to kind of sit alongside your terror of being out back in big waves, and you've got to relax, because every movement that you make shifts the shape of the mat, because the air would move around. And the idea is that you align with the energy in the wave. So it's another way of expressing for me what life is about, that when you surf well, you don't master anything. You align to what is already there in nature. And the other thing that's maybe important to say that's popped into my mind is that, and to go back to Carl Jung's work, I think Carl Jung's work points us also to the role of the dead in our lives. That there is, especially post his Red Book, which was the publication of his private diaries and his drawings and his mandalas and his kind of the real cornerstone of his work. I think that work is a lament of the dead in that sense. It's pointing us back towards this layer of depth psyche that is also about having a relationship with that which has gone before us, and staying connected to that too. So they're the two things that come into my mind.
That's beautiful. And I have a big copy of the Red Book about 5 feet away from me.
Oh.
And it is a beautiful work visually and I mean, on all levels, beautiful work of his. Thank you for that really lovely, lovely background on just a little bit of who you are. I do have to say that piece about you being on the mat, and I made a note, I'm going to paraphrase it because it's so beautiful. You don't master anything. You align with whatever is already there. And that's just so beautiful, because in many ways, that's the journey of life. We want to master it. We want it to align to us. Yet so often, and I just had to highlight that beautiful piece that you offered us, because that is a lot of that journey of life. I remember this past summer, I was learning to do paddleboarding, and different from what you were doing, but in a sense the same. It's being very attuned to what the waves are asking you to do and what the waves want you to do and how they want you to move. And so you have to let go of ego. You have to let go of thought and just feel into it. And so many times that's what life is asking us to do, is just to let go of trying to force things and instead align with what is there. So, wow, what a rich beginning. I'm so excited to I'm so excited. So when we look at the listener's question, that idea that, because there are pieces to it, it seems like such a simple question, but it's rather deep, because there's the series of failed relationships. It was a female writing in. And so a series of failed relationships, her not being sure necessarily what's happening. Is it her? Is it something else? And are the dreams she's having about wolves coming in and chewing on everything or gnawing on everything? What's the significance? So take that in any order you like, please.
Well, we have this technology, which is dream, that I'm so pleased that you've brought that up today, because all that you and I both said about different iterations of surfing there relates to dreams, in that sense that we have this technology, this nighttime technology, that if we orient ourselves towards dreams in a way that is open and welcoming and aligned to what is inherent within the dream, we might just live our life forward a little bit, in a sense. And I think certainly psychology and our field of kind of psychotherapy in that sense has had a tendency to chop dreams up into different pieces, which is very kind of emblematic of our society and the way that, our politics, our social lives, all of that. And I think there's a way of approaching dreams that is very humble and very empty and empty-handed, that really opens up to the field of the dream itself and gently connects it with the threads of our life. So I didn't write down the dream, but I got it kind of somewhere kind of floating around my mind. But before the dream, your listener had mentioned this kind of pattern. So we're back to patterns again, this pattern of relationships. And I happen to think that we are born into different fields. So do you know the saying, the ghost in the nursery? It's an old psychoanalytic saying. Yes. So if you think about how carefully the parents kind of prepare the nursery for the baby to come home from hospital, everything's in its place, and the cot is set up, and the teddies are there, and you've got this. A lot of care, a lot of thought goes into receiving a baby into a home. And at some point that night, the baby is left on their own, either his own or her own, in a sense. And that's when the ghosts of the nursery appear, these kind of undigested chunks of emotion, these things that can't be thought about in the family, this kind of lineage, this ancestral lineage of ways of relating to each other, the history, all kinds of things, in a sense. And I think that forms a field around us, in a sense. So we're born into fields, and there's astrological fields, there's familial fields, there's kind of cultural fields. And then there's something deeply personal, I think, for that particular person, a particular baby. And I think one of the tasks of life is to understand and separate out these separate kind of fields in our lives. They're kind of like psychological atmospheres that permeate and surround us, in a sense. And one way to really understand them is to look at patterns in relationships, in that sense. So there's many ways of doing that. One is to have a narrative, like your listener. So I'd like to know more about the particular shape, the particular tonal quality of those relationships. How do they begin? How do they end? What is the kind of process of that? And then we can connect that with the dream, because your listener kind of brought both the pattern and the dream together. So it's likely there's some kind of resonance between them. Of course, there's many different ways of approaching dreams, right? And there's Freudian and Kleinian and Jungian and dream work and process work and all kinds of things that we're exposed to. But they all rely upon an open spirit, I think, and a stance of not knowing. So I practiced Zen for many years, for about 29 years now, from my early 20s to now. And Zen is a practice of simply, well, it's not even not knowing, it's non-knowing. You practice non-knowing, this empty-handed negative capability. I think that's very useful, so that before you try and make something of the dream, you allow the dream to come alive in you. So it's useful to picture the images in the dream, to kind of approach the dream, almost to actively kind of imagine it forward and see how it unfolds in that sense. And then we have symbols in the dream. We have images, and images are important, right? Images represent something to us. So most of all, we have an image of a wolf in the dream. So we might have all kinds of personal reactions to that image. We may have an experience of coming across a wolf on Dartmoor. I'm here in southwest of England, on the edge of Dartmoor, which is a kind of wild kind of place. And so we might be afraid of wolves. We might have a particular favorite fairy tale that we have a connection to, of Red Riding Hood or something like that, the wolf. So, but before we start to claim the dream and start to tether it to our particular life, it's worth staying with the objective quality of the dream. So what is a wolf in nature? So let's go back to nature. Let's align with what is. So I would, with the dreamer, I would have a think about what is a wolf to me, or what is a wolf to her. I would appeal to encyclopedias and books around nature about what is the life of a wolf. Where is this wolf in the dream? Is that aligned to where a wolf would usually be? How does a wolf eat? Does it chew its food, or does it tend to tear its food? And yet the dream architect has the wolf chewing food. So you kind of look for all these kind of objective qualities to the dream and then start to tie it to the qualities in the relationship. It's difficult to say much more about that without knowing much about the dreamer's life.
I think you have said so much, because I also work with dreams in my practice, and then doesn't surprise me that we're aligned,
because we have
yes, because we have similar training. And as you are explaining it, so listeners, I want to just pause for a second. If some of what Dan is saying seems unfamiliar, like the ghost in the nursery and these patterns that are passed down, we know, I really don't want to spend too much time in the really cognitive rational realm, but we do know through research about the intergenerational transmission of patterns. For example, on looking at the negative side, unhealthy side, if the father is an alcoholic and yells at the kids and the wife, those patterns get passed down, and the kids absorb that trauma and may absorb those behaviors and pass those behaviors down to their own kids. And so we can see, if we get away from that specific realm, or look that it could happen, of course, happens in so many positive ways, where we can see that loving energy can be passed down from a grandmother to a grandchild, and loving tradition. So we're always passing energy. We're passing energy. And so Dan is just explaining it to us in another way and I love that image of the ghosts in the baby's room. And it sounds as if, going back to your introduction, Dan, as though there might have been so many ghosts around you from birth through 5, that you were so busy being entertained by them and absorbed. What do you think of that? Is that a possibility?
It's funny you say that, because I've come full circle with that. It's an objective or a subjective fact that I did see lots of ghosts in my childhood, and I experienced many things that I describe as kind of PSI phenomena in terms of kind of parapsychology and stuff like that. But I don't think it's particularly paranormal. I think it's just that I think we're very quick to, develop this more left-brained way of being in the world. I think our society is speeding up in that sense. And, when that baby's brain triples in weight in the first 13 months of life, a lot of that is the cognitive kind of side of things, and this reflective capacity, this capacity to categorize our experience and put language to our experience. And I think there was something intuitive in my resistance to language. I mean, I could talk, I just chose not to. That helped me stay in that arena of perception that is a little more liminal in that sense. And it's been very helpful for me in terms of my work, as it's turned out. My first career was on the stock market. And
oh dear.
I was both in many ways, I was a pattern reader on the stock market. I would make use of dreams. I would seek kind of information in different places. So I had this very uncanny ability to predict things. And yet there was something about the world of trading and stock trading that was deeply injurious to my spirit in the way that I see life. So I was kind of working at odds with myself. So I was both this potentially really good trader, a really effective trader. And I did very well initially. But at the point at which it came to my attention, it was at odds with this little boy and his way of being in the world. I lost all my money in 3 months. I just wiped the whole account. And it was liberating, because it enabled me to then step into, I studied theology, and then kind of stepped into the world of Jungian psychology and training.
We have something else in common. Before I was a psychologist, I was in a field that was also injurious to my spirit. And listeners, if you're in a part of your life where there's something that feels like you're injuring, whether it's a work situation, a romantic situation, a family situation, I think that's such an important piece for us just to think about, just to put out there today, that pay attention to whether or not you're in situations that are allowing your spirit, your being to grow, or if they're injuring your spirit. And that's actually why I wrote my first book, The Joy of Imperfect Love. No, that's my fourth book. I'm sorry. Joy from Fear. Joy from Fear was based on my doctoral dissertation into how we get held back by life, by ourselves, actually, by engaging in things that we're doing. We think we're doing the right thing, but we're doing it out of fear. We are injuring ourselves. And so much of our journey in life, and of course, there were parts of dream work in that book where it's so important to be able to pay attention to the messages from within in order to break off the shackles that we've either put on to ourselves or other people have somehow tried to put onto us. So I'm very aligned with you on that we do want to pay attention. It sounds as if the person who wrote in today is looking at that. There's something about her relationships that are injuring her. They're not satisfactory. She's not happy with them. So how can she find messages possibly in this dream? And I love the path you took us down, which is to look at those symbols within the dream. And I have a question for you. Many clients, when they come to me, they'll say something like, can I talk to you about a dream I keep having? I say, sure, you can. And they'll say, well, I looked it up in a dream dictionary and I'm not getting an answer. It doesn't resonate with me from the dream dictionary. And I said, that's because dream dictionaries do their best to give us a brushstroke, but dreams are deeply personal. So we have to keep working with that dream to make space for that dream that appeared to your unique psyche, to make it very much find the meaning within it. So that dream that we're talking about, the dream of the wolf or wolves, plural, coming into the house and gnawing at, I think it was gnawing at everything, might mean something very different to a hunter who's having that dream. And as you were saying, what do wolves mean to the dreamer? And also to you as the analyst, so that there can be some massaging of the energy to help the dreamer find the answer that resonates with her. And I think that's the power of dreams, when we give them space. And sometimes it's also not just space, but time. They come to us and they unfurl themselves, because dreams are messengers. What do you think of that?
I wholly align with what you're saying. I mean, they're messengers of the field in which the dreamer is embedded in that moment. And dreams often have a compensatory quality. So they might offer a kind of opposite view to the conscious attitude that the dreamer holds about relationships or about. I mean, this is also in the dream, the wolves come into the house. So it's also something about the home of that person, in a sense, which can be their body, could be their sense of self, could be many different things. But it is a careful unpicking. You have to have this to and fro around dreams, in a sense. And that's why it's not just a case of chopping it up, although it's very interesting and important to think about the objective quality of the wolf or the wolves and the chewing and the personal kind of meaning for the dreamer, but also the therapist potentially that they're telling the dream to. And then there's the myth and the symbol of a wolf. You know, for instance, in the Christian tradition, you have the wolf and the lamb. You know, you have this kind of, the lamb is innocence, but the wolf isn't just the destruction of that. The wolf carries some wisdom, some intelligence. And, you know, the wolf is in many cultures both a diabolical creature, but also one of deep spiritual insight too. So it's a mixed, you know, and what kind of wolves are they? Are they grey wolves? Are they, are they indigenous to that person's country? Or are they wolves that actually, when we look into the symbol, maybe you might ask the dreamer to paint the wolf and to bring the wolf to life. And then the image of the wolf surprises the dreamer in that it's a black wolf, and they didn't understand that about the wolf until they've kind of embodied it in that way. So then we might do a piece of work together of, okay, where do these come from? what kind of life do they live? How, if they break into someone's home, what are they doing, in a sense? There's so many kind of ways of taking that up. I've also been very much influenced by the work of Arnie Mindell, Arnie Mindell and process work. And so I'm very interested in bringing the wolf to life in many different ways. What's it like so in the dream, the wolves are breaking into the home. But what would it be like to embody the image of the wolf and to move around the room like the wolf and to feel the power of the wolf and to intuit the wolf's intention, the dreamer, in that sense? There's so many ways you could stay with that dream for weeks and months and really bring the dream to life. And then you don't arrive at one kind of solution or one translation or interpretation, but the dream lives a life in you. So just like in-depth psychology, you have this idea of living out this particular diamond, so DAIMON, that is not demon, this kind of spirit of your life that is seeking expression in you. So it might be that there's a wolf-like quality that needs to break in to that dreamer's life more. They need to be more wolf-like in their relationships, potentially. Who knows?
I like that piece. And I remember ages ago, I read Clarissa Pinkola Estes, her book, Women Who Run with the Wolves.
Yes.
And it was just, I'm such a fan of her work, but it really gave me a new respect, because I think I probably grew up being afraid of wolves because of Little Red Riding Hood. And when you see that wolves are so wise, they have so much power and so much wisdom within their daily lives. And I love the energy that you're giving this, because it sounds, many people think a dream is one and done. You have it, whatever, you wake up, you move on with your day. And when we're looking at dreams as messengers, as you're describing it, we then form a relationship with the dream, a give and take where it keeps informing us and sometimes it eventually subsides. Sometimes it will come back later. But I'm thinking of a client I worked with, and we did quite a lot of dream work, but she had come to me originally because she had been in a long-term relationship and the individual betrayed her, and a dream came and then had already found somebody else and was, then went on to that other life. So she had this dream of being in a school bus, and then it went onto the beach, and then this person appeared and set her on the sand. And we worked with that dream in almost every session. We were working on other things, but it was a nice foundation. And as it turned out, what she came to see is that dream was almost not foretelling the future, but as she worked it, she realized, yes, she got onto the sand. It was unfamiliar. She got in there in an unexpected way, but she didn't fall on the sand. She didn't get, taken up by the waves, but she stood. And we, as we worked with the dream, we realized she had this power to stand, to really move on with her life. And she surely has and surely did. And so when we see that dreams, when they are, I think when they're given respect, as I say, as messengers, and I do believe we have what I call detritus dreams. There are dreams that are just, trying to get rid of something that was bothering us in the day, that we don't need to do a lot of introspection. But I do believe there are many dreams that come to us to offer us comfort, reassurance. And you had said earlier, I wrote it down, you said that we can use our dreams to live life forward. What do you mean by that?
Well, I suspect that dreams come from a dimension of the mind that is kind of outside of time. We see this in what Jung called synchronicities, when kind of these uncanny things happen, in a sense. And of course, we're all familiar, or many people are, with the notion of precognitive dreams, and that we might have a dream that predicts something, and then days later it's unfolding, and we're sat there thinking, "Oh my God, I've dreamt this. I've already seen it." But I think dreams, whatever the dream architect, is that puts these dreams together, it comes from a layer of mind that is that quite possibly past, present, and future are kind of collapsed into one in that sense. And I do think it's funny the way you just spoke about this lovely example of your client and the dream of the sand and the release of energy, because I think, especially what Jung called numinous dreams, this kind of numinous charge to dreams. I think there's certain dreams that carry a quanta of energy. And sorry, I'm quoting Jung a lot today, but that very Jungian, that very Carl Jung movement of circling around a dream kind of until you have that aha moment, in a sense, and that quanta of energy is released and it can be felt. And then life, there's a blockage removed, or suddenly you get something about where your life is going and you can step more boldly into it in that sense. So I'll give a personal example. I lived in Malaysia for 4 years fairly recently, and Malaysia's a wonderful place, wonderful food, wonderful people, lovely part of the world. And it was during COVID, and I felt really ill. I had a catastrophic reaction to the COVID vaccine, and I was rushed into a Malaysian hospital at the height of COVID. So I was very fortunate, but I was in a hospital situation, in the ICU unit, where nobody spoke English, and my wife and children weren't able to visit, and I had no way of contacting them. And yes, it was painful, and it was incredibly, there's a lot of fear, obviously, and panic in me at the time. At the same time, there was a dreamlike aspect to it. I lay there in that bed, and spontaneously, the first thought I really had once I was aware of where I was and the situation, the gravity of it, the first thought I had was, this is a dream in my body. So I was having blood clots throughout my body.
Oh my goodness.
Around in my lungs, around my kind of heart. And so in a dream, so if a client brought a dream and said, I had this dream that I was taken into hospital with all these clots in my body, I would think, okay, what is clotting about? How does the body clot? What is what causes a clot, and what is clotted in this person's life? So I had lots of time in my hands. So I just lay there and thought, okay, let's go looking at this dream. Let's kind of, where are the barriers in my life? Where am I clotted? Where is my energy stuff? Where is, it took me a good 6 weeks to work it out. And then I was okay. And then, but actually I have to say very straightforwardly, I mean, I have my frustration still with that time, but I came home from Malaysia. I had to return to the UK to be under a hospital team here. Physically, I was depleted. Energetically, I was completely uncluttered, full of light and joy. And since I've been back in the UK, it's like my life has taken on a new hue of just feeling unblocked. And it was a dream. And it was a dream that I had to sit with. I'm stubborn, so I had to somehow, my dream architect had to convey that I had to be stuck somewhere to really kind of stay with it, in a sense. So I truly believe that. I truly believe it. It was.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sorry for everything you endured. Yet I can see that the beauty in it is that you ultimately became unclotted, and that persists in the most joyful way. So that's, that's a beautiful outcome. And I believe that as well, that not all of our physical ailments, but a lot of those that we feel as physical ailments are related to, I take a very holistic body, mind, spirit approach. And so many times the part where we are stuck in the body is akin to something that is stuck in the psyche.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think the body dreams.
Sure. Oh, yes, it does. Marion Woodman, are you aware of Marion Woodman's work? Yes, yes. And definitely the body dreams, because it is part of who we are, and it has its own way of experiencing. So I could talk to you forever. And when you're talking about quoting Carl Jung, I love, you can quote him all you want, but back to our listeners who might prefer something that they can put their hands on if they are dreaming, or if they are wanting to dream more or find answers in other forms. Many people look at oracle cards or tea leaves or tarot cards or signs in their hands, the lines in their hands. Do you have any ideas, any thoughts on how people who want to find reassurance, both within the self, but have a little nudge from the universe? What do you think of that?
I think it's the oldest way of living that exists. I think we've moved a long way away from that. I mean, I deliberately used the word technology for dreams earlier because we don't tend to associate technology with things that are immaterial in a sense. We tend to think of technology as, the smartphone or this, this iPad that I'm, these things that are brilliant. And yet it's all here within us. So there are dream, and also when I talk about dreams, I mean moment to moment dreaming. It's surrounding us. So as we're talking right now, if something catches my eye out the corner of my eye, it's like a little flirt of dreaming that is there. So it's as much about trusting that and tuning in and leaning into this kind of sense of children are very good at this, right? Animals are very good. Watch an animal. I think in my life, in terms of my practice as a psychotherapist, I think much of it stems from, I don't know if it's true in the US, but in the UK, you have to undertake a 2-year infant observation. And there's different aspects to that. Part of that is you go into a family from just before the birth of the child and on a week-to-week basis for 2 hours, wherever this infant is, until they're 2, you follow and you observe, and you observe very carefully and pay very close attention to the development, the interactions, the nascent kind of mind that's developing in this baby. And there's 2 different real aspects there. One is you observe a mind forming, and you can link that to theory and all the stuff that's kind of important about training to be a therapist and stuff like that. The other point is the quality of attention you develop, because this baby has a very different mind to your, it's very, in kind of neuroscience language, heavily right brain dependent, which is a much more interconnected, much more field-like experience of things. So you don't make any notes when you're with the baby. When you go home, you make some kind of notes of what you've observed. And my experience of that for the first kind of, 6 to 10 months of a baby's life, I would sketch images, or I would write kind of jazz-like poetry, this kind of fragments of thoughts emerging in a sense. And of course, this is our inner architecture. This is you. This is me. This is all of us. Right at the early building blocks of our mind is this capacity to make sense of the world in this very pictorial, very poetic, non-linear kind of way. And it's available to all of us. We just need to find what way works for us. By the way, I loved it so much I repeated it. I did 4 years of infant observation because I just found it so fascinating. And so go and watch a baby for an hour if it's not too strange. Or watch dogs and cats. I mean, I don't know if you know that
Absolutely.
they're embedded in fields, and they pick up so much information. There's a technical term for that kind of attention called co-anesthetic attention that babies have. And that's that way of taking in the world that doesn't subliminate everything into I'm seeing this, or I'm hearing this, or I'm smelling this. It's everything at once. And it's this dream-like kind of way of experiencing things. So it's a bit like, if you have a good tarot reader, there's different ways of reading tarot, right? There's ways
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm with you on that. My giant schnauzer is at my feet. And
I have a mini schnauzer.
Do you?
Yes.
Freedom is my giant schnauzer, and he's when we walk every morning, and he sees and feels and smells so much more and you're right, there is that childlike effervescence, but also that ability to absorb so much and see so much and feel so much, and it's not segregated. And as you were talking earlier, just a little bit ago, about, I was getting quite sad because we have put so much emphasis in today's world on the left brain and that which is, air quotes, rational, that I believe we have sacrificed so much in the way of gut instinct, those glimmers that you're talking about, and realizing that there is so much more to who we are as humans. And looking at the listener who's doubting her dream in a sense, it sounds she felt enough to write in, but when we see that we are so much more than, I think there's a part of me that's a Luddite that wishes technology had not taken over our lives the way it has. But if we can become more integrated and give more credence to that which our gut is telling us, that which our senses are telling us, which is another reason it's interesting. We were talking about wolves, because that's a big piece of it. Wolves have that knowing. They are so intelligent. They are so wise. And I think we have a lot to learn from our animal teachers that, in the wild, because there is a lot. And so for the individual who wrote in, there's a lot in that wolf dream that is asking her to slow down, as you said.
The wolves are chewing. They're
Yes.
digesting something. They're not just, I imagine wolves often tear food.
Yes, I think they
take
do.
it in very quickly. But these wolves in the dream are chewing this. They're bringing attention to the capacity to chew in that sense.
Yes.
Something to digest. And, as you say, slow down. I was reminded as you were talking of the philosopher and neuropsychiatrist 𝐂𝐻𝐍𝐄𝐂𝐓,
Yes.
who has written some incredible kind of long books on the subject of kind of the different brain hemispheres, the left and the right, and the interaction between them. There's a lovely phrase he uses that, the way it should be is that the world presents itself to us, to our right brain. And it's the right hemisphere of our brain, the right side, that can take in the world in its holistic kind of wholeness. And then we're supposed to represent it that's the categorizing, that's the, that's a dog, that's a giant schnauzer, and he's doing this, and all of that. And then we're supposed to hand it back to the right brain. But we're living in a world where we too quickly hand it over, and then we stay there. And then we've got to be really careful when we're approaching our dreams, or even if we're, to answer your question of how to open to this more, it's got to be a true opening. It's not got to be, I'm going to open it so that I can improve myself, or I'm going to, left-brained of, forever kind of new iterations and new mountains to climb, in a sense. It really is a return to our animal nature, to our instinct, as you say, to our gut, to this childlike fascination with everything that we're taking. Imaginary friends, the imaginal as a noun, as a place that we visit. And
absolutely.
We listen to,
it's so wonderful that you use the word imaginal. I was just about to say that imaginal world. And I love how you used childlike, which is so different from childish. Childlike is the curious and the openness and the wonder. And listeners, you can do this in your everyday life by remembering or making time to play. As you were saying, Dan, making time to sketch and draw. And for me, I see the world. My husband and I were having this conversation the other day. I said, honey, when someone's telling you a story, do you make pictures in your mind as they're talking? And he looked at me and he said, no. And I said, oh, I never realized that about you. I do. When somebody's telling me a story, my brain is painting pictures. It's painting pictures. And so give yourself permission to paint pictures in your mind. Give yourself permission to move your body like a child and play. And the more we practice all of these things, as you said, in the US, Dan, to answer your question, no, in the realm of our training in psychology, you pick to do your training in a certain realm. And unfortunately, I did not have, although I, have in my own life, definitely observed my own kids and watched them move through life, but not with that objective stance with which you were doing it, that objective, curious visiting. I mean, that would be, I wish we trained in that way. That would be phenomenal, but no, we don't. So, it's just amazing to talk to you and hear these different perspectives and give our listeners and the individual who wrote in an understanding that the dream world matters and we can make it a bigger part of our lives and use our dreams to, as you did, to get unclogged, to get uncluttered, to get unstuck. And because I really believe that, like other forms, the psyche, the gut, our being inside us knows so many things. And so many times that rational left brain actually gets in the way of us doing. Because when you were a stockbroker, I would imagine there was a part of somebody in your life saying, oh, this is fantastic. You're cut out for this field. But somewhere in you, there was a deep knowing that all the money in the world doesn't make this a good fit for me.
Absolutely. I mean, there were probably easier ways than losing all my money very quickly. But that's just me in essence. I was reminded again, Jung again said that there's a 1,000,000-year-old man in us, and woman. Of course, Jung was a man of his time, so he would say man. But there is a 1,000,000-year-old human being in us that has access to all of that knowledge, all of those lives, back to the lament of the dead, all of this, what it is to be human and in this world. And Marie-Louise from France, one of the early Jungians, and again, a brilliant woman and an incredible interpreter of fairy tales and of dreams. She would argue that if we pay attention to our dream, the dream architect favors us and offers us bigger and bigger and more energetic dreams. So it really is worth our while.
Marie-Louise von France is in my collection behind me, along all of my other Jungian books. She's fabulous. Listeners, I will put a few of those links in the show notes, because if you find this interesting, there is so much to look at. Memories, Dreams, and Reflections is one of Carl Jung's enduring books that's very palatable. So, oh my goodness, Dan, thank you so much for your time. Are there any other, I could talk to you for years, not just days. Are there any other pieces you'd like to highlight for our listeners?
I don't think anything new. I think it's just a real heartfelt invitation to take a step back. This notion, and it's crept into psychology too, this notion that somehow taking a step back is a regression. And yet, I can't remember who said it, but it always struck me as good wisdom, that regression is always in service of adaptation. And, quite often life confronts us with thorny issues or patterns, get stuck over and over again. And we tend to have this sense, and technology kind of mirrors this, that we have to move forward. But often we're being invited into is a step back in our life, back into an earlier time, back into this childhood, this childlike wonder and way of perceiving things. And there is gold there. There is, in these images, in this kind of ordered way of receiving things, in the poetic, there is life.
Oh, so much, so much. And taking that step back, for some reason, as you were talking, I was getting an image of sometimes we get so close to that edge of the cavern or the pool or the pond or the lake or the ocean. Yet when we take a step or two back, we see more, we notice more, there's more to see, we get a different perspective. So I'm a big fan of stepping back. So yes, listeners, give yourself permission. Going backwards is not regression. It's a different perspective. It's giving yourself space. And certainly if you're stepping back into a more childlike place of wonder and awareness and delight and curiosity, oh, what could be better than that? So, Dan, where can our listeners find you?
So I have a small website called theunthoughtknown.com. And it's not always kept up to date, but that's where people can find me. If I've got some, this kind of talks here and there dotted around on YouTube. If they just search under my name and dreams, usually. And there's a little piece of writing that I often come back to that I think I'm quite proud of, actually. And at the time I wasn't. And it's called The Art of Mat Surfing. And that's to be found in the Heretic magazine. And I think it nicely or nicely enough, just explicates my stance to the mind and to a way of living. So I can send you the link.
Please do. Listeners, it will be in the show notes. Dan, thank you so much for sharing your time, your gorgeous energy, your wisdom with us. I'm so grateful. And listeners, thank you. And listeners, thank you for sharing your time and energy with us today. And this is Imperfect Love.
Thanks so much for sharing your time with me today. Remember, you have the power to transform your life and love fearlessly, if imperfectly, and it's my privilege to help you along the way. You can find more life-changing content, including my books and other podcast episodes, at drcarlamanly.com. Feel free to submit your own confidential questions through my website. I'll do my very best to include your issue on a future episode. If you found this podcast helpful, please subscribe and leave a review. Until we connect again, this is Dr. Carla Marie Manly wishing you oceans of blessings and love. Please note, this podcast is psychoeducational in nature and is not intended to replace formal mental health support. Please contact your healthcare provider or emergency hotline if you need psychiatric care. And as always, please take good care of your amazing, wonderful self.